I have a strategy. Everybody knows me. I talk about it all the time. It's called always have an ask. I think it was 2008 or 2009. The world is basically dead. And I was staying at the old Essex House Hotel. They gave me the room on the 44th floor. I remember I get in the elevator, 40, the door opens up on the 40th floor. Into the elevator comes Warren Buffett. Now, Warren and I rode in the elevator for the next 40 floors alone. Nobody else came into the elevator. What was our conversation? And I love asking, teenagers really, this question. What do we speak about? And I tell them, nothing. I didn't say a word. So everyone says, why? So I said, in life, you always have to have an ask. What's your ask? So, you always have the child who says, give me $1 million. It's something stupid.
Right.
And I respond, yeah, okay. Right. No. So I said nothing. I go, so here's the thing in life. You always have to have an ask. If you don't have your ask ready for whatever it is, when a situation arises, you're not going to know what to do. We're in real estate. How often do you meet somebody and they want to know, well, you tell them what you do and you tell them about it. So they want to, what are you working on now? What deal can I get into now?
Right.
So if you have a fund, you can say, well, my fund does X, Y, and Z.
Right.
You always have something to put it into, right? If not, if you don't have a deal prepared, you're going to be twiddling your thumbs. You got nothing to say.
100%.
And that's what you always have to have your ask ready. You always have to be prepared.
I think we should start with like your earlier life story and kind of how you got into real estate, because you weren't always in real estate. You were doing some different things. Let's start there.
Sure. No problem. Like most good Jewish boys, my mother wanted me to be a doctor. But, I want to say that wasn't in the cards, because it was a very odd situation. But so I went to college and I took all my sciences and said, okay, well, we'll figure this out. At the same time, I took all my business classes, which kind of like that was my escape from everything that was going on. My parents were, very old school. It's the only way to kind of describe it. They didn't understand. I was running my own businesses starting from, like as a little boy. I was like the worst kind of child in one way. My parents they both worked. So, what do you do with kids on the weekends? So they would drop my brother and I off at baseball card conventions. Drop you off in the morning, pick you up, at 5:00. So there I was starting at 6 or 7 years old with my inventory of cards. I was a Star Wars carrying case filled with a bunch of, with my cards or my special cards. And I would go up to somebody and he'd have something, on the desk. I would look at it. And it's funny. I knew my stuff. My brother's 5 years older than me. So, I guess I hung out in the area. So he would say, I would, see a card. I'd be, what do you want for this? And the guy would say, give me $22. And I would say to him, I'm 7 years old. Are you really going to take advantage of a 7-year-old? How do you do that? It's not worth $22. The guy's like, okay, I'll give it to you for 20. I go, all I can get is 17. So he'd look at me, he goes, okay, you're cute, fine. 17, but that's it. I go, okay, no problem. Here's my inventory. Hold on to it. I got to go find my mother and get the money. My mother was at work, by the way, so it was kind of comical. I would give him my card, so he'd hold my collateral. I guess I learned the business early. I would take the card. I would go to 2 other dealers over there, and I'd basically play the same game. What would you give me for the card? And the guy would say, I'll give you 17. 17? I'm 7 years old. You're going to take advantage of me? Finally, we'd get up to $20. He'd give me $20. I'd give him the card. He'd hand me the 20. I'd go back. I'd pay the guy off. I'd make $3, and I would be doing this all day long.
Love it.
And I would build up, I'd buy some stuff for my inventory at times. By the time I was a teenager, we were buying from Topps directly 1 million cards a year. At the time, people didn't even realize you can buy, cards, literally in unmarked cases, basically, not in the plastic sheets. They literally sell them in boxes of 500 or 1,000. And we'd go through the cards, which was tedious, but basically our fun time. And we'd pull out all of the rookies because you didn't know what would happen, and all the superstars who you knew about. Everything else we would sell back to baseball card shops for flipping. They would make packs that kids can flip cards.
Yep.
And we'd basically make back whatever it cost us to buy the cards every single year. But we'd be sitting on, 100, or whatever, or more of Don Mattingly rookie cards or whatever we had. And we would keep these. By the time I was a teenager, like maybe 16 years old, we recognized that supply and demand was a problem. Because you'd look and you'd see that, new cards were selling for, $100, $200, $300. maybe $500. Tom Seaver's rookie card, I remember at the time, was selling for like 1,000. Things that were selling for, high numbers for things that were in mass production. But tobacco era cards weren't selling for nearly enough money. They were selling for, 2,000, 3,000, 1,000, depending upon what it was, but not nearly what there should have been for something that was limited production initially, but surely, by that period of time had nothing in inventory. So we liquidated probably 90% of our portfolio, and we bought, handfuls of tobacco era cards. Ty Cobb, cards. There were 4 different Ty Cobbs made from the T206 set, Babe Ruth cards. I bought them and stuck them in a vault basically, and went off to college. And I'll get back to why it's important. My junior year of college, we went away for winter break, and it was legendary. It's the only thing I can basically say. I don't think I can even say half the stuff on the air, but it was a legendary trip.
Were there parents involved?
No. This was in college. This was just kids, right? I can't even like think about half of the stuff. I don't remember probably half of it, but it was crazy that when we got back, everybody, it took about 4 minutes before everybody heard what happened. So starting, in September and August, when school started up again, everyone's coming up to us and saying, "Oh, we got to go with you guys. Oh, whatever you do, we're going with you guys, this year." So I turned to my roommate and I said, there's a business in this. He looks at me, he says, "What's a business?" Which is why he's an anesthesiologist now in Seattle. And I said to him, "I'll tell you what. You want to go? I'll pay for everything." It's not, I didn't particularly have the money to do this, by the way, but I go, "I'll pay for everything. Just tell everybody it's going to be crazier than last year. Come see me." So he's telling everybody, "Yeah, go see Avi. It'll be crazier than last year. Go." We didn't know. In the meantime, we had a friend who was a travel agent. So she was able to pull something where Continental Airlines at the time, the old United, basically chartered a plane for us from New York to Florida.
Oh, wow.
And they charged us $120 round trip for a ticket. And every 20 tickets gave me one for free. So that was my kind of my deal to have. I needed a hotel. Didn't know what to do. There was a very nice old gentleman from Brooklyn that somebody introduced me to who owned the Days Inn in Miami Beach.
Mm-hmm.
All right, which is it might still be a Days Inn.
There is a Days Inn next to the Soho House, which is still around.
So it's right there. That's it. 42nd and 43rd. So that's
right there.
That's the original. So he comes to me and he says to me, I said, "Look, I really would like to rent, basically the majority of the hotel for break, but I don't have any money to give you in advance. But this is what I'm doing, and this is what it is." I kind of gave him my business plan. He was 83 years old. He looks at me and he goes, "I have to ask you a question. Is there going to be sex and maybe drugs and alcohol going on?" I said, I'm not going to lie to you." I go, "Yes." He said, "Okay, here's the deal." He goes, "I will give you the rooms." I'll never forget it. He goes, "At $17 a night." But I took the whole thing, I'll give them to you at $17 a night for 2 weeks on one condition. I said, "What's that?" "You have to come back afterwards, take me to lunch, and tell me everything." He goes, "I'm 83 years old. I have to live vicariously through somebody."
Unreal.
Please. Unbelievable. And by the way, I will tell you, I lived up to my word on that one. So we took initially 121 of my nearest and dearest on this trip for 2 weeks of
the whole plane, everything.
Whole plane, hotel, everything, basically 2 weeks of debauchery, and everything else. And in my senior year of college, I netted about $45,000
Amazing.
in profit, which was more than they were paying the accounting majors by about 50% coming out of school at the time. And my parents, who have, zero business sense whatsoever, turned to me and says, "Okay, we're going to graduate school now," instead of saying maybe go to 10 schools next year or anything else. So we laugh about it, not so funny, but we laugh about it. But it was kind of what I was always, about. So I went off to I got a whole bunch of job offers from the business side. Swiss Bank O'Connor, Bankers Trust at the time was around, JP Morgan. I had all these Wall Street offers at a rough time. My parents are like, "Oh, no, school. So I got into University of Pennsylvania for a joint dental MBA program.
Dental MBA
program. It was very, very odd. But I said, I guess much to my chagrin, I told my parents, "Okay, I'll do it," because it wasn't worth it wasn't worth fighting with my mom. So I went off to school. I spent 1 year at Penn. Loved Penn. Penn was a great experience. Maybe it wouldn't be today, but it was a great experience then. But I realized two things. I realized that I loved business and loved everything I was doing on the business side, and hated dentistry, had no desire whatsoever. And even though my parents kept on telling me, well, just go to school, graduate, and then you can go into business, which made no sense whatsoever, I decided at this point I was going to put my foot down. So, at the end of my year, I said, okay, I'm done. And I got a job on Wall Street as a leveraged buyout analyst in what was, the end of the go-go days of cool leveraged buyouts.
So is this like Mike Milken era or after
It was
that?
the end.
Okay.
It was kind of the tail end. And I went to work for a company that was doing what was really the coolest strategy. When I think about it now, I was a grunt on the team, which was great because I had nothing that I really needed to do. So I ran all around the country, traveling, working like a pig, but that was like the happiest kind of situation. But they would buy companies and take them public simultaneously, which eventually the SEC said they can't do anymore, but you can still do it actually in London on the AIM exchange, interestingly enough. But
it's like a SPAC.
It's exactly, so it was really the early SPAC. And what would happen was, take like retail. So you'd buy, a chain of retail stores. You'd have, 10 furniture stores. A guy wanted to retire, slow down, maybe it's generational passing, they needed to take some money off the table. So, you would just taking advantage of the arbitrage between public and private markets. So, we would pay 5 times, EBITDA. We get a valuation of 10 or 12 times on the public side, right? We'd sell 50% of the company. They'd keep, a small piece of it as paper, stay on SEO maybe. We'd bring in a whole new board, and we'd have, with some of the money that we were raising on the IPO, we would have, double of the number of stores you have we would get ready to open. Yep. So we would basically plan and we would say to them, so when the SEC said, well, what's going on? Why are you selling something for X that you're buying for Y? He said, it's not the same company. In addition to the expertise and everybody around, we're turning around and look what we're doing. We've got a whole new company here. This company is going to have twice as many stores, double the income, double everything else like this. It's not the same thing. Eventually they didn't like it. They said that they don't want to, keep doing it. And I was done. I really wanted to, switch to the trading side of the business, which was really where I think my passion was lying at the time. So I became a trader. First I was, I had clerked years earlier on the floor of the NYMEX commodities exchange. And I learned it, and I got a job, trading, upstairs, not off of the floor at the time, but I was trading on a desk filled with all the original Stevie Cohn guys, all the guys who worked with Stevie Cohn originally. His original desk was at Gruntle.
Yep.
Joe Battipaglia. That was his original desk. So it was all of his original guys. And I got this fantastic education, but I also had this knowledge base from the commodity side that was a bit different. So I really started specializing in trading, commodity-based equities. So, I did a lot within that field, but initially it was like working part-time. I was used to being a banker. I was running around traveling, and here, I'd come in very early and I would do my research and everything else. But whatever you did, the market was closed at 4:00. There was nothing left to do. So I started, getting bored. This is how you deal with ADD as an adult. So I went to law school at night. So I applied, got into law school.
Why'd you want to do that?
My mother. I didn't. Honestly, I didn't. But I needed something to do with my time, and I figured, why not?
Yep.
The reality is, my first year of law school, I put in time, I put in effort, and everything else like that. By the time second year of law school, I was at night, so it was a lot of hours. By the time second year came around, I realized I didn't have to go to class. I could really just take my, kind of take my sweet time, study for tests, a few days before, the week before, even less as time went on. And I was a fairly good writer, which kind of helped, but I didn't have the pressure of failing or doing poorly because I was making, significant dollars already working. So I didn't care,
right? Which
was half the game, really was half the game. So I went at night, but, even after my first year I was sitting back like, okay, I don't have to go to class. What should I be doing now? So I built my first, chain of restaurants. So what I did was I took the baseball cards that we had, getting back to where we were earlier, sitting in a vault, sold, much of the collection of cards, took out over $250,000.
Really?
from my side hustle as a child. Yeah.
What do you think your return was on that?
Exponential. I mean, you couldn't really put a number on it. It was really, if you could have built a fund around something like that, which was, so it would have been so, before its time, it would have been like buying Bitcoin,
Yep.
in 2013 or something.
Were you
it made no
tracking this
sense.
all along, or was it
Not,
something you forgot about?
we didn't forget about it. Always followed the markets. And truth be told, maybe would have even held it, except we had a need. And the need at the time seemed like a better use of it than sitting in a vault and,
Yep.
And kind of waving at it, and that's what we, so sold it, built our first, bunch of restaurants, ended up building up, the first 5 restaurants that we had, which was taking up way too much time, the complete opposite of everything I had.
Yep.
So after about 18 months, of doing this, and again, I was supposed to be in law school at night, never showing up at that point. I was working full time, which was killing me, going right afterwards, weekends. I was sleeping, 2 hours a day at best. And so what we did is we, created a management buyout. And, one of my managers had a friend that had some money. So, he put some money up. We held a little bit of paper, got them a loan on top of everything else like this. And we created a full MBO and got ourselves bought out of our restaurants, which was great.
Wow.
At the time. But then I was sitting here back with time on my hands, twiddling my thumbs.
And money.
So what did I do? The internet craze was starting to really come about. This was 97, 98. So what had happened was I was in law school and I was making money. And at the time I was living in subsidized housing. My well, at least mostly my then girlfriend was in med school and we were paying $330 a month for rent. So really, like, and I was in New York, so
Yep.
taxes were I guess devastating and everything else. So I'm like, what do I do? So I was giving away charity. Honestly, I was I was giving back, which was very nice, but I was definitely not the most organized guy. So come tax time, my accountant says to me, "Where are your receipts?" Which was a fairly newer thing at the time. And so I said to him, I said, well, "What's a receipt?" So he said to me, he goes, when you give, charity at the time, I think it was $200, it wasn't even $250. You have to have a charitable receipt. Like, I'm giving like money, small amounts out, large, it didn't matter. Yeah. I'm like, what can I do about that? He goes, we'll start calling all the people you gave money to, which that was never, I look at it, that's never going to happen. I go, well, what could I have done? So at least I'll know for next year. He said, well, if you had a charitable foundation, this wouldn't be a problem. I said, what's a foundation? He said, look, that's about all I know. He goes, the rest is on you. So I did what you would do at the time when there really was no internet. I went to the law library that I had full access to, in school that actually still had books, which I don't think they still have books anymore. And I went from learning everything I could about charitable foundations. And I realized it's a very legal product, difficult to form, difficult to administer, kind of no one wants to handle it and everything else like this, but the banks love it because the assets, under management stay forever because you're only giving away 5% generally a year. Yep. So as long as you're yielding better than a 5, this is a great way. Wealthy people can pay their kids through it. There's a million other things you can do. It's a great vehicle. So I realized an anomaly in the market. I said, okay, there's something over here. Let's create some software around this. One of my other friends who was also, living at Albert Einstein at the time, his wife was in med school. He was a techie. And I said, okay, let's build this. I'm going to fund it. I'm going to help you spec it. I learned how to spec software, which was, just another skill set, I guess, that developed over that time. And we sat down for nights and nights and nights and nights and designed an ASP software model that creates and administers these charitable foundations and allows you to donate and takes all, does all the tax filings, keeps track of everything, kind of did everything. Hired some programmers. I did I was the initial VC on it also. Hired some programmers, had a team not only here, but a team in Uzbekistan, in Tashkent. My partner spoke Russian, so it helped, but we hired one Russian speaking programmer here and 10 more for every one here, there. And then, we built that first round. Company was called Foundation Source. First round of the, of it was me. Second round was really nice, crop of angel investors, all of whom were, some of the original guys at American Express,
Wow.
the big boys at American
Yep.
Express were all involved. One of the head of Starwood was involved. A whole bunch of these guys all got in, early.
Was it a big enough market to make a real business?
Well, so the foundation, the private charitable foundation market was like, at the time, I think it was 150, $200 billion.
Wow.
So the administration thereof, was significant, really significant. So what started to happen is, so we went out. So my job is, again, I was still trading at this time. I was still in law school at this time. I was still doing all these different things, and I had this nice business going. And I had employees and I had a partner and everything else. But I realized also that it was getting to a point it was going to go over my head. Sometimes the best thing we can do as entrepreneurs is to recognize when something is above us or we need to bring in, professional help. So what we were able to do, and I was able to do under my watch, was, bring in all the first revenue. I flew to Columbus, Ohio, and met with Jamie Dimon, who at the time was the CEO of Bank One, wasn't even at, JP Morgan Chase yet. And he says in the meeting, he said, look, I love the product that you have. It's very cool. He goes, I wonder if you can do something for us. He said, we have a ton of foundations that we currently operate, but we're losing money on the division. Our operating team, we're losing money and no one wants to handle it.
Right.
Would you take over our existing foundations and take an admin fee, take them over, but leave all the assets under management? We're like, yeah, we don't want the assets under management. Great idea that you had about our business, so we were kind of pivoting on the, I guess on the fly. And he says, so we say, yeah, he hands us at the time, I think it was, if I remember correctly, I think it was like $130 million, like a crazy number of foundations that we ended up picking up from Bank One at the time. Really big number. We took, 20 or 25 basis points was our fee. Everything was automated anyway.
Yep.
And, our business was born. Next round, we raised over $30 million of VC money.
Really?
Afterwards, yeah. And I passed it off to professional management because, like I said, I was over my head. They came in. And unfortunately, it took a very long time for this company to be viewed differently, and it never was. We always wanted to be viewed as an internet company. Wow, it's an internet sensation because at the time, internet companies were going crazy.
Yeah.
$1 million in revenue was getting you $10 billion of value. Like, it made no sense. Right. But the world was viewing us more as a financial services company than anything else like this. But we sold the company in 2019 finally. It was a 9-figure exit. When we exited out, I wish I could tell you I owned the whole company. I did not. The VCs owned the bulk majority, but it was my baby, and we did nicely from it, and it was a very cool little piece.
Wow.
But after I passed that off to professional management, I'm back to twiddling my thumbs, just trading, which for me was like nothing. So the chairman of the NYMEX, a guy named Vinny Viola,
owns the Panthers
now, tapped me on the shoulder and said, really, let's build a firm together. So I took 37 of my nearest and dearest that I had trained over the years with me, and I built my own, firm in partnership with Vinny, who we bought out after a couple of years. Built it up to 200 guys. Wrote some of the earliest algorithms, especially on our commodity-based equity strategies, and our algorithms were basically interpreting news-based events and trading off of them. Just some really interesting stuff. Which today would probably be highly outdated because that industry is moving so fast, and crazy.
Yep.
And then I merged it and sold it with a New York Stock Exchange member firm.
So did Vinny step back from the NYMEX to launch this new business?
No. So Vinny had a very big business at the time called Pioneer Futures. And Vinny owned a company, I remember he told me, called Mako, which was out of London, which was really the precursor for Virtu, which is his electronic trading, algorithmic trading platform, which he had. Vinny had his business. He was backing me.
Got it.
And I was trading through his clearing firm that he owned, which was additional volume for him and everything else like this. I was a spec in his world as his world was starting to really take off.
Wow.
Which was very cool, to watch. He then went and bought a bank in Texas. I mean, he exploded it from there. I did it, for a bunch of years, I think we built it for over 4 or 5 years, and then merged it and sold it to a New York Stock Exchange member firm. Realized it was time to to go into the next thing. And that's how so I moved to Florida and I got into real estate. And that's one of the things I was talking about before. But basically what happened then was I ended up teaming up with a family in Florida, who we're like Southern cousins. And, they were looking for something for the second generation. And I was looking for something different. So I got to do the legwork basically to figure it out because they were looking, but they weren't actively looking. So I found a building in West Palm Beach.
What year is this? Like what time frame? What's happening in the world?
2002, 2003.
Okay.
Really 2002, 2003-ish. So I found a building in West Palm, which was George Perez owned St. Andrews of Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard. St. Andrews over there, one of his original deals that he had built. And I looked at it and I'm like, this market it's good, it's busy. The property is very, very cute. I think this would be a great condo conversion. Being honest, I really knew very little about condo conversions. I knew very little about real estate. It was not what I knew at the time. This was really my feet to the fire foray into the game. But I understood finance, and a lot of this business is just creative finance and marketing. Two things that I think at this point I really had spent some time in. So I jumped into this. I said, this would be interesting. I went and saw my partners here. They said, okay, this would be an interesting deal. We put everything together, worked it out, got our, all of our pre-construction. But the beauty at the time, honestly, was the financing. So at the time, Merrill Lynch came in and gave us 95% of the cap stack, which, anyone in real estate here is going to tell you is crazy, crazy on a blended rate deal, basically senior and mezz kind of put all together.
How'd you get them to do that?
They were doing it. It was a program. My partners obviously had the connections at Merrill, which helped out. And funny, I don't think they had done any business with Merrill, but Merrill was clamoring to get into bed with them. So this became a first. It was a nice little sales job, basically telling Merrill, listen, this gets your foot into the door. I still don't know if they did any other business with them, outside of, the business that I did with them over the years.
But not knowing anything about real estate, how would you know that this is even a good opportunity? How would you know about the creative financing that you could deploy? How did that even happen?
Great question. So here's the first thing. Basic math. Okay. I knew a little about condo conversions, but what I knew was a basic, your Pythagorean theorem, which, you're dealing with the sum and the parts. And here you had a situation where the sum, that you were buying the property for was a lot cheaper than the parts. The parts in this situation broken up were worth a lot more money than the sum. I was buying the building for $95,000 a unit. 200 units, we paid $19 million to buy the building. Right? And we knew at the time that condos in that West Palm area were selling for $150,000 to $170,000. Right? I understood that
arbitrage
as a basic. It was a straight. I was a trader, so it was really a trade. Understood it. Also understood that from a financing standpoint, if you could finance basically anywhere from 95 to 100% of the purchase price for a buyer. Mortgage tables at the time, 6%, maybe 7%, they were, fluctuating pretty heavily at the time, whatever it was. But if you took the price of the mortgage on the financing, you took what our operating costs were, your HOA, what would be your HOA fees, on an ongoing basis over there, taxes and insurance and everything else, and put it in, the sum had to basically equal what it cost to rent. So we knew, because this was West Palm, it was a high rent district, even then in different ways, we knew that the sum made sense. And if it didn't make sense and you threw in the tax benefit, it had to make sense, which started happening a little later on the time. This time, the numbers all worked very well. You knew that the numbers would work. So I was a numbers guy. It made sense. I'm looking at it and I'm like, this makes sense. So when I went and saw my, who became my partners eventually, they're like, yeah, it makes sense. So I knew the numbers would make sense. I knew it was pretty. I knew that it was, fairly well, done, that it was going to cost us, basically $5,000 or $6,000 a unit to really update it to what would be.
So you're going to be all in for roughly around $100,000 a door.
And even remember, you take away your closing costs, it's going to cost you 10% on the exit and everything else like this. But you had a nice margin, really a nice margin that you can make on the deal. It really just the numbers penciled out beautifully, and there really wasn't a lot of activity in this market. So basically, at the time, you had a handful of converters, not many, really not many, and they were really situated down, in what I'll call downtown, but not really Miami Beach, on the beach. They were situated in more urban-esque markets, and this was really an early suburban conversion. I did, most of the early suburban conversion stuff here, and people weren't doing that.
What did you think the big risk was?
So I didn't find it a big risk. I'll tell you why I didn't think so. I would never look at a property at the time that wasn't trading at a minimum between a 5 and a 6 cap on a current income valuation. So I figured that if we started the process and things weren't working, we surely would be able to keep it as a rental. So our worst case scenario was we were going to have a rental property that was going to take a little more time. Truth be told, if you could own for $95,000 a door right now in West Palm Beach, that building, we probably would have made much more money than we ever did in anything else.
Right.
We really would have killed it. We just would have had to, pick it up through a cycle. So that was really what it is. It was a numbers game. It was really, getting to know it. And it was something else. It was, in Florida, we say cojones, that was really what you needed. I came in from New York, where I was young and super entrepreneurial, so kind of willing to push boundaries. And I was a trader, so really, I thought I had an attitude, I guess maybe differently as well. And I came to Florida that was super old school. It was not the Florida of today. It really wasn't. There was, you could get ahead with Moxie. We used to joke that if you wanted to open up a service business, AC, plumbing, all you had to do is have a slogan: "We show up." Nobody did. It was it was terrible.
Yeah.
So, I remember calling a friend of mine, in New York at the time, saying to him, it's crazy. My first month here, I think I met with 3 bank presidents. I met with I was young. I was, I wasn't even 30. I think I was 29 years old at the time.
The barriers to entry were really low.
Zero. And it was more a matter of, of really taking the bull by the horns and running with it. So I picked up that property, and we closed on the property, and within 6 weeks, that was 200 units. I had 800 more units under contract in different marketplaces. So who became my partners, they said to me, we're doing this on a deal by deal basis at the time. They said, listen, let's just formalize this. Apparently you have a knack for really finding this stuff and making it happen. Let's formalize this.
Why were they willing to bet on you? I think they were a real estate family.
There.
You had no real estate experience.
Mm-hmm.
What did they see in you?
So I wasn't touching their primary business. It really wasn't a risk. I was, one of the elder statesmen, one of the family. He ended up, being my active partner, and then it was a place to bring in, a bunch of the kids and that next generation in terms of that. It wasn't a high risk proposition in the sense of it was completely independent. So it wasn't, I remember when I was a kid years ago, I was probably in college, and I remember seeing an ad because they still advertised for a company. I probably was a Penn at the time. They were advertising for somebody to, firms would come and advertise on campus before you'd interview. And the company was called Sprout. And I'm like, that's an interesting name. So, one of my buddies said to me, yeah, the head of DLJ, his son went and started his own firm and called it Sprout because he's a sprout from his dad. And that's what it was. And it was kind of no sweat off the dad's back in that situation. He just kind of capitalized off of the name. So what happened over here was, as long as we kind of kept it independent, which we did, our focus was non-competitive. Like I said, I was suburban and they were really urban. They were larger in terms of what they were, doing in terms of that. And I was not smaller in terms of scope and scale of the size of projects. We did some big, projects, but, definitely, we weren't building, I wasn't vertical, I guess from that standpoint. I wasn't, doing big high-rise buildings. They were doing more of the big high-rises and playing a different kind of game. So, it worked out from that situation. And, we kind of went hog wild. We started doing tons and tons of stuff. Over 4,000 units that we did, that we converted. It was, and we did everything in house. We built our own sales force, on the selling. At the time, everybody was hiring these companies, and they were all doing the same thing. And I looked at it and I used, I guess, some of the skill sets that, we develop. I said, we're selling a consumer product. We're not selling condos.
Mm-hmm.
We're selling toothpaste.
Yep.
It doesn't make a difference. So I hired a guy who was a senior level guy at Procter and Gamble, marketing department, to build a marketing team. And I said at the time, I said, look, I go, we're doing, literally, $1 billion plus, dollars of projects. We have a significant advertising budget because, at the time, also, really there wasn't much online anything.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of newspaper. And I said, so let's build an agency. Again, these are, tricks that I learned over the years in different businesses, I guess. I said, let's build an agency. Agencies, were able to keep, 15% at a minimum, but generally up to 30% of the cost if you did, all of your own placements and everything else, especially if you knew how to purchase remnant, a whole bunch of different things. I go, so, we're doing tens of millions of dollars of advertising. I go, we have our own agency over here. You're going to be able to have your department of 6 or 8 that he had. I go, it's going to be a profit center. It's not going to be a cost center. Right. And we're going to come out with the same thing we would have had if we used somebody else. So we did that. So I hired this guy, my head of sales. I needed someone to build a sales team to be able to, not only for our mortgage bank that we had, because we were doing all of our own financing in-house.
How did that come about?
So it came about basically, when I was in New York before I moved to Florida, and I was, starting to sell my company, and I was looking at what I was going to do kind of down here. I said, I guess I was gone through law school already. I guess I was a student, pretty good test taker, I guess. So I said, let me take my mortgage banking license tests. I go, I have this crazy concept. I go, I want to open storefronts, mortgage banking storefronts. I go, you should be able to go into our storefront next door to Publix if you need a mortgage. And, we could take a small 1,000-foot space, get signage. And is that signage worth what was probably at the time, $3,000 of rent?
Right.
Sure, you make much more than that off of a single person coming in. And I'm getting the flow off of a busy retail center. Sit 1 or 2 commission-based people in these types of locations. And suddenly I'm creating, what's most interesting of businesses.
And you're just selling the mortgages to a bank or some other financial institution.
Taking it into my warehouse line and selling off the paper. Exactly. And I'm like, let's, this is interesting. And while I was like literally taking my exams and starting that, I started, the real estate stuff, and that started taking off. So I'm like, I guess I was able, in some ways, I probably should have kept that business going too, but I was able to incorporate that into what it was. So I approached Wells Fargo, and Wells Fargo, built a mortgage bank in partnership with us. So we built a mortgage bank, and we did an inordinate amount of business because we flowed everything through it. So you're basically able to do your own financing for these deals, get everyone in and everything else. And it was, it was good. But what we were really doing was very interesting. Was we were doing affordable product, which is part of my, my thing, I guess, in different ways. I wasn't selling condos on the beach to wealthy people from South America who were coming in. We were really selling, domestic buyer, a lot of first time people, first time home buyers, not as many investors.
Yep.
Much of what we were selling was financing 95 to 100% or more. We did a deal in Naples. We sold out a building in Naples in 6 weeks. And I can tell you that the entire building were teachers, firefighters, and police officers who lived in Naples. But we were the cheapest property to hit the market that Naples saw. And the numbers, like I described before, just, they worked for a rental standpoint.
So why did they want to buy as opposed to keep renting? Because some of them were probably your tenants, and then they ended up buying the building. So this was a building actually we built. We actually built the building in partnership with a builder and bought them out and then converted it. That was our sales job. So when you talk about the selling of the market, when I said I brought in my head of my sales guy was a software guy, my Procter and Gamble guys, we went and taught the market. We educated the market. So we told people that, like I said, I go into the fire station and I tell the guys, look, this is great. And you're on it's one of the greatest jobs, that you guys can be doing with a 20-year horizon for work. We know that that's your 20-year horizon. So what you really should be doing over here, and this is what I think you should be doing, is buying. The great thing is you got a nice W-2, you make money. I can get you in for nothing. First time you bought, I can get you in for nothing. And you're going to save $70 a month versus what you're paying in rent. And you'll own something.
And you're going to own it. So in the long term, when you're going to look back, what's going to happen. And it's funny, I just actually recently looked at that building in Naples, and I saw that condos that I think we sold starting at 127.5, are still selling. Like I saw one, like a one bedroom selling for like $300,000 just now. And I'm like, damn. So
A firefighter did well.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Everyone did well. It just, it was great. And so, it was a lot of kind of the approach that we took. And we did it. We were very busy, but at one point, at the end of 2005, I realized that there was a problem. Every time I go to buy a property, all these other competitors were coming into the markets and they were bidding the properties to stupid levels. And, I can't say that I'm, the smartest guy in the room. And I said, the market was going to crash and I predicted everything that was going to go on. I didn't. I just saw two things happening. The first thing that we saw was that my 5 cap rule, where I really needed to buy something that worked as a rental, wasn't working.
Where was it?
4s and dropping, and people were buying things that made no sense, and it wasn't working anymore. And it's not that I didn't think the conversion would work, but I thought that there was a time window. The second thing is we tracked everything, and we tracked velocity. And no matter how much you wanted to tell yourself everything's fantastic and great, I'm still a numbers guy by nature, and the numbers were dropping, and we were seeing the numbers starting to trail off. And when you saw that, you knew there was going to be a problem. So at the end of 05, it was the last deal we did was the end of 05.
But 05 was early. So what
early.
do you think
you
were seeing that?
At the beginning of 06, I probably felt like an idiot. I can,
so what was happening at that time? Why was it starting to drop?
So I think it was my buyer. 06 still continued because the investors were still coming in, especially the South American buyers.
Yep.
I wasn't selling to that group. I was selling to the users.
So did they already have the unit?
So that's what I think was going on. The users had the unit at that period of time, or they decided they were going from condos to houses.
Right.
So I was losing my buyer in any level of velocity. Other people were advertising for my buyer. I remember I would be driving through different marketplaces, Texas and different things. Georgia was a prime example of a place that, the cycles were always interesting. All the Class A property, people who were in Class A, they're constantly building Class A apartments in Georgia because they build crap. So during great markets, all the people who live in A's would buy these houses because the houses were cheap enough that it made sense. And they were building houses like they were nothing. The people in B's would move to A's. The people in C's would move to the B's. And all the C properties would have to be knocked down because they were horrible and they couldn't do anything with it at that period of time. And that was like the continuous cycle. But when you started to see that, you also understood that you were getting the rents you were getting in your A's looked like B's before.
Right.
So it wasn't the same thing. So, I think our buyers were we were seeing the decline of the buyers and the velocity. So it helped. And again, we still got hurt on the way down because we still had, a lot of units that we needed to sell off, and we were, but, we could have gotten much, much more, could have been much worse. We ended up doing better than that. So, fast forward, I guess, through that, the market crashes and everything slows down. And, for a while, everybody's, twiddling their thumbs, trying to figure out what to do. So we were licking our wounds, but we were not, we weren't in the same boat. There wasn't any new condo conversions to do. And my partners were, I would say they were looking to slow down. At that point, 30 years my senior, and I was looking, I had to eat. So I was looking to continue, maybe even to step on the gas, because that's kind of my nature. So I ended up, I guess, pivoting my strategy at the time, right? So maybe what I should have done is I should have, just bought, multifamily for $30,000 everywhere in Florida that you could have probably bought at the time, and it would be a very different conversation. But I always liked something that was more of a challenge. I always felt that I needed to do something that was different. Maybe different intellectually or whatever else it was. So I started on this whole concept of urban redevelopment. So first I went up to Delray, so I relocated everything, up to Delray. And I started to accumulate, how is, I guess, an even longer story, but I started to accumulate some stuff downtown. So, I rented an office from a guy. And the guy had a clause in here. He's like, listen, I just want you to know, I just bought this building and the whole building's vacant. And I own the 2 next door. So I own the whole square block. He goes, but I'm going to try to sell it. So I'm giving you a lease and I'm going to give you whatever you asked for. It was in like 2009 or something. The market was so bad, maybe 10. So he's like, I'm going to give you whatever you want. He goes, but I'm going to put a clause in there that says that I can, I can move you, right? I'm going to sell. So, I pulled out my law degree that I didn't use ever anyway. And I said to him, I go, I'll tell you what, this was a block off Atlantic Avenue, like literally like a block off of it. And I said to him, I go, as long as, and he wasn't from here. I go, as long as it's closer to Atlantic Avenue within a certain radius.
For those who don't know, Atlantic Avenue in Delray is some of the best real estate in South Florida.
Right. And this was it was a crappy old building, 1 story. It was just big. It was very big, nothing else. But there was nothing that was a block closer to. I was literally on the corner, 1 block off of Atlantic. There was nothing between me and Atlantic. And if there had been, it would probably have been 10 times the price that I was paying for this. But there was not. It just didn't exist because they were going to redevelop that if there was anything over there to put in that was office. So I knew this, and I knew that would force an interesting conversation at some point. So he gives me a year for free of rent. I signed a long-term lease, knowing full well that it wasn't going to be a long-term play. 11 into my first 12 months of free rent, he comes to me. He says, "Okay, I put under contract to Related, who was going to build condos over there, who was going to build apartments over there." And he goes, "So I'm going to have to move you, as soon as this deal closes." He goes, "But I'll tell you what, you don't have to pay rent until then." So I point to my clause. I'm like, "Okay, you got to move me." I go, "Good luck."
Where are you going to do it?
Right. So he goes, "I'll find something." Comes back to me, maybe 30 days later, and he goes, "Okay, there's nothing, right?" I said, "Of course I do." I go, "So how much?" So I'll never forget. He ended up paying me, I think, maybe like $200,000 to get out of a lease that I had a security deposit up on because I never had to pay rent because I was always during my free period of time, which was my first, nice Delray deal. So what did I do? I took the money that he gave me and I bought a small lot that had approval to build an office building.
In Delray?
In Delray. Also a block off Atlantic it was on Southeast First. Right? So 1 block off Atlantic.
How did you get that deal? So Related's now snooping around on Delray. How did you get that little deal?
So basically this was like, I guess maybe like 2010, 2011. The market 2010, the market was dead. Foreclosures, this. So someone had bought this piece of land, put in a plan to do this, was trying to sell it. Nobody was going. He was going to build, it had plans for like a 6,000 foot office building. It probably made no economic sense, even at the time. But we figured, sure, why not? We're looking anyway, so let's go and put it under contract. So I put it under contract. I close. I buy the land, and I realize there's 2 pieces. There's 2 things on each side of the building. On one side is a halfway house, which Delray had a lot of. Right, these guys, and I looked at it and I saw it was in foreclosure. Right, and the other side was an empty lot. Now the empty lot was attached to the parking garage, which was attached to a very, very large apartment complex on Atlantic Avenue, which, was, built in 2005 with, started in 2005, finished in 2007, or 2008. So it was a mess, upside down. And on top of that, it was supposed to have been built 10 years earlier, but somebody had sued the landlord for them not to develop it. It took 10 years and kind of killed the market. So at that time, BlackRock, I think, was the money behind it. They basically, they were just, they owned it without any other issue. And so they had this piece of land that was kind of attached to the parking garage that I found out was also in foreclosure. So the land went up for auction. And I remember they paid $990,000 for the land in 2003 or something, during the height of something else. So I bought the land for about $120,000, something,
unbelievable.
But it wasn't a big piece of land, but it was attached to my piece of land. So now I was going to have a bigger lot. So then I said, well, you know what? Hey, this building next to me is in foreclosure. How do I, and it was a very, very difficult foreclosure. There were game players who knew the game. And at that time, I remember that was a big thing. And the city wanted to get rid of it because it was a halfway house and it was not a good look for everything happening on top of it. So I had to play Find the Note, which was a game at the time, where you're trying to find out who actually owned the note because the banks had been going under so often that the notes were going from place to place.
And you felt comfortable buying the note and dealing with the foreclosure?
Ignorance is bliss. So I didn't know any better, which was great. So I went in. I ended up finding the note. It was being held by an institution out of Naples, and it was ridiculous. It was missing pages. It was a mess. It was a mess. But I took it through the process. I think when they're basically ready to cart the guy away in his business, anything else like this, I paid him off a little, on top of it, so he left quietly, which was incredible because the banks had never thought of doing this,
right?
And they fought with a guy who was very, very good at fighting. Instead, what I ended up doing was I gave him his deposit for him to rent a property and move his people to it because I didn't want his business. So he did that. So I have 3 contiguous pieces, in downtown Delray that, are about, an acre of land. Now, an acre of land in downtown Delray, again, for the people who don't know the market, is nice, even on, but I had to get zoning dealt with over there. I went through a zoning process, and Delray has,
What did you want to build?
So we were going to build multifamily, but with retail base.
Okay.
So I got a approval, to do it. Got a site plan, and everything else like this, and then I set my sights higher. So as we're standing and looking at our property, you can look across the way and you see the Sunday house and Delray and everything kind of over there. And I knew that the owner, of the property was definitely eccentric, to say the least. And it was very weird for anyone who doesn't know. Sunday House is a botanic garden with a very, very cool restaurant over a whole bunch of acres basically in the middle of downtown Delray.
And an event venue.
And it is, so it's the largest wedding event venue.
Yep.
Around. Really, really, really cool. But the guy who owned it was, who built it originally was definitely out there. And it was an old historic building, the main building. He took a whole bunch of stables and created hotel rooms and all these really cool things. But he used to fly his parrot on a private plane to France every summer to learn French with a proper accent.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, no one does that.
That's a great story.
Right. Crazy in that sense. So I decided that I was going to brave a conversation to see if he was willing to sell. And I go in, to speak to him, and it was like a surreal scene. And I'm speaking to the guy, and I'm like, I'd love to buy your property. I'd really love to buy your property. And he starts, telling me no, and he's going off and off and off. And you I guess at one point, if you do this long enough, you start to, kind of like a Secret Service guy looking for a tell. You're looking for someone to kind of give in to something. So as he's saying no and no and no and no and no, he throws in something like, it would have to close quickly or something like that. Or like he starts to do this, and I start to realize that maybe, there's a chink in the armor. Maybe he's having financial issues. The markets this was a rough time. So I kept on kind of going, and I pushed him a little, and then I came back a couple of days later, and I pushed him again, and he had said, okay, well, it can't just be this, it has to be everything that I have. And so we finally cut a deal with him, and I cut a deal to buy, all of his land, which was,
all the way to Atlantic Avenue?
All the way to Atlantic Avenue.
Yep.
And then there was actually a check cashing store on Atlantic Avenue that was next to his piece of land, who didn't know that I was buying the Sunday House. So it was a company based out of Canada at the time, one guy, another eccentric guy. I guess I broke all of my rules. I told him I wanted to buy it. He's like, no, I'm not going to sell it. I go, no, really. What would you sell it for me? He goes, look, it's a triple net lease, to us, but there's an out clause in the contract or something else like that. We had a whole bunch of different things. He goes, but it's, he goes, why would I sell it? He goes, I own it, free and clear. I have a lot of money. I do this. I go, what would you sell? He goes, I'd sell it for a 4 cap. He's not understanding Atlantic Avenue at all. It had nothing to do with even the value of what it was. That was off of an income. So I think I paid maybe $2.25 million for a corner big, chunk of land and everything that was contiguous to everything else like this. Picked that up also.
How did you negotiate the price for Sunday House? Was that
There was a lot. It was a lot of back and forth, but he started. I made the opposite issue. I kind of said to him, I'm like, look, I can't get into what you're into this for, right? You built your dream and you did everything else like this, and he was into it for probably triple what we paid. Yeah, he put so much. Like I said, he brought in trees from like every.
Yeah, we looked at it in 2020 or 2019, right before COVID, right during COVID.
You looked at it from me. I was the one who sold that.
So I think Todd from Peb.
Oh, Todd, you tried to buy from Todd.
He was talking to us to
joint venture.
Yeah,
so Todd bought it from me.
Yeah.
So what happened was this. So I ended up. So we went back and forth on price, but he probably had a real cash flow issue that was coming about, because the slower it was taking me to hit something, the more fluid he was becoming. So he was,
Yep.
So finally made it happen.
Yep.
And so by the time all was said and done, we had put together over 7 acres over there. That was the beginning of the easy. The hard part was we now had to take it through zoning in Delray, which took years.
So I want to pause for a second and go back to when you were trading, when you were selling these baseball cards, when you were doing the trips in college. What did you learn about negotiation? Because you talked about looking for a tell. So I want to just like double click on that and understand some of the things that you learned during that period in negotiation that you use today.
No problem. So I had a very, very, very close friend of mine who I went to school with, and then was, I was in college with him, and then he was in Penn when I was in grad school. Also, he had transferred to Wharton, so he was there when I was there. We were super close. We were in business together a little later. Probably the most brilliant business guy I'd ever met. He was Wharton's wonderkind coming out. He was a partner at North Star by the time he was 25. The Reed. He was incredible. Ended up, crazy ass story, but he ended up moving to Puerto Rico. Got married for a month to a local, Puerto Rican beauty queen, who, when he decided after a month that the marriage was over, she recognized that she had a prenup that didn't include death. It only included divorce. So walking out of a restaurant that he had built for her, he was stabbed like 40 times and died on the street.
Really?
Crazy story all over America's Most Wanted. She finally, it took 10 years before they were able to extradite her from Italy, which they did. And she and like 4 family members got life sentences in Puerto Rico. It's a crazy story. Yeah. But he was probably the best negotiator I ever met. And we used to talk a lot, about what to do, strategy. He and I were so young when we were getting involved with certain things. We used to put baby powder in our hair going into meetings so people would think we were older. Our hair looked white, like all these little tricks. But what we would do is you'd remain quiet. So we'd be negotiating at a table, and the strategy we'd always use is you really can tell what's going on based upon the reaction of someone. It's not always who's going to talk first. People think that. So I let people negotiate with themselves. Someone's going to sit there and they're going to be like, okay, I'll give you 20 million. I want 20 million. And I'd be silent. And I'd look at them and I'd be counting sheep because, with ADD, you're doing anything you possibly can not to say something. And I would be silent. Like I'm contemplating it, and I would wait. And most people are very uncomfortable, not only with silence, but they're very uncomfortable with their own thought if they want to cut a deal. They think they have something. And if they're not, they're really not in a rush per se to sell it or anything else. If they're super calm about it, it also tells you something about what they want. They know where they're at. They know what they want. They're not going to give. And I would be silent. A minute and a half. Horribly painful, by the way. Horribly painful. And I would wait to see if there's any chink in the armor. And if there is none, and I'm watching it, I would speak. Sometimes I would, I would ask something that's completely unrelated. How are your kids doing? It's like something completely unrelated, to see if it made them even more uncomfortable.
Right.
That I'm not getting to the point, and again, give them another chance to start negotiating with themselves. If they're not, I know that they're very firm where they're at, which means I'm either willing to play in that range or I'm not. But usually, and in most cases, people just start crumbling, and they start, sitting there telling you, okay, I really want 19, but I'll take 18 if you'll close quickly at 17. And then, you can put them at one point you put them out of their misery, and you play the game. But I realize that it kind of works in every single thing that you do in every single area. People just, no one has any patience. And especially when you have a situation. Look, we've all been on the other side of it. You have to get out of something. You have a cash call coming up. You have a need for something else like this. So your patience is all tied to your situation. So the most important thing for you to be able to do is to pull yourself out of it completely and think about something completely unrelated to whatever you're negotiating at the time that's going to keep you calm and keep you, reserved through it. And I've done it, throughout. Look, I used to have to negotiate buying companies, and I had to negotiate it, property. We've done, like I said, billions and billions of dollars of transactions. It's just become that whole game. So, I use that skill set across the board, and you learn to read people. You learn to see them, read them, get to know them. The more comfortable they are with you, also the better it is. The other thing you really want to always do is, so I have a strategy. Everybody knows me. I talk about it all the time. It's called always have an ask. So I tell a story where I'm in an elevator with, this was probably, I think it was 2008 or 2009. The world is basically dead. And I was going to New York, fairly often for business for something. And I was staying at the old Essex House Hotel, the old Jumeirah.
Yep.
And I'm sure you're familiar with it. And
right on Central Park South.
Right on Central Park South. And I was coming in, and I was going through American Express. So they gave me some crazy deal because they obviously were not full ever. So I'd come in, they charged me whatever it was. They'd give me like the best suite they had, for like 300 or 300, whatever it was. It was just crazy. And I would go, and this became like my regular stay. So I'm there one day. They gave me the room on the 44th floor. Remember, I get in the elevator, 40, the door opens up on the 40th floor. Into the elevator comes Warren Buffett. He gets into the elevator, steps in. And I lecture in front of kids a lot, and we're talking all the time. And I tell people, so I say to everybody, now Warren and I rode in the elevator for the next 40 floors alone. Nobody else came into the elevator. Tell me.
So you didn't go up. You just.
No, I was on 44 going down.
Oh, you're going down. Okay.
And it stopped at 40.
Okay.
He gets in. Next 40 floors, we rode to the elevator, alone together. What was our conversation? And I love asking, teenagers really, this question. And, I'm a chatty guy. It's not like people ask me. So what do we speak about? And I tell them nothing. I didn't say a word. So everyone says, why? So I said, in life, you always have to have an ask. Right? So what's your ask? So, you always have the child who says, give me $1 million. It's something stupid.
Right.
And I respond, yeah, okay. Right. No. So I said to them, look, here's the problem. I go, I'll give you an ask. I could have turned to him and I could have said, Warren, listen, I'm the best plumber in Omaha. I know you've got a cute little 3-bedroom house. And you don't have many issues with your 2 bathrooms that you have in the house. But if you ever do, I'm the best there is. Put me on retainer. Give me $200 a month. If there's ever a problem, you call me middle of the night, day. I'm the best. Now, that's an ask. Might be a crappy ask, but that's an ask.
Well, not if you're a plumber.
I guess true. I go, but that's an ask. I go, I'm not a fangirl, so I'm not going to sit there, fangirling over him, but I don't have an ask. So what am I supposed to say to him? Hey, Warren, I love you. You're wonderful. Congratulations. Great deal you did last week. I don't really care. I go, I was in real estate. He was in everything but at the time. The world was kind of blowing up anyway. So what was I saying to him? So I said nothing. I go, so here's the thing in life. You always have to have an ask. Whatever you do in life and in business, whatever it is. I go, if we're in a bar and and we're in college, there are a bunch of girls sitting at a table, right? We're going to go walk over to them. We have an ask. They're probably going to say no, but we know what the ask is, right? And they know what the ask is. So we're going to make our ask and we're going to make our play, right? You have that ask always prepared. But in life, if you don't have your ask ready for whatever it is, when a situation arises, you're not going to know what to do, right? we're in real estate. How often do you meet somebody and they want to know, well, you tell them what you do and you tell them about it. So they want to, what are you working on now? What deal can I get into now?
Right.
So if you have a fund, you can say, well, my fund does X, Y, and Z.
Right.
You always have something to put it into, right? If not, if you don't have a deal prepared, you're going to be twiddling your thumbs. You got nothing to say.
100%.
And that's what you always have to have your ask ready. You always have to be prepared. So it's always my whole big thing, always have an ask, right? So it's the same thing when I'm talking to somebody and I'm negotiating with somebody. It's my job to understand what their ask is of me in this conversation. I know what my ask is. I'm always prepared. So what's their ask of me? And the quicker I understand that, the quicker I'm going to be able to play the situation. Life is a chess game. And we have to understand that we're playing chess. If you're doing it right, the guy next to you is playing checkers.
We each get a move.
Mm-hmm. So you've got to know. But knowing it's Maslow, and knowing his wants and needs up front, knowing what it is that he needs, if he doesn't have his ask even fully prepared, I can help go towards his ask. I can help move towards it. If I knew that that guy had to get out of the house that was being foreclosed upon, I knew what to do.
Mm-hmm.
If I know, that I'm buying from Bank of America, a distressed building right now, and I know that Bank of America has a policy, sell at the best price, and I know what's going on with the best chance of closing, I know that if I hand them a list of my references of people I've closed with in the last 12 months with no issue, with nothing else, show them that and give them my price, I know that I'm answering their biggest concerns up front. So you always have to be prepared in that sense of whatever you're doing. So I figure that as I'm going forward with everybody.
So in that situation, you're not going to have an ask because you weren't playing a game with Warren Buffett. But whenever you're in a negotiation, you're always going to have an ask. My question is, you've been around like successful billionaire real estate types. And one of the things that I try and think about in my mind, especially the ones that I'm friends with, is not having an ask and just enjoying their company, enjoying learning from them, and maybe saving an ask until when I do have the ultimate ask, because you don't want to waste it on something ridiculous.
So that's a great point. And I'm with you as you're dealing with friends and everything else. And plenty of times you don't want to ask your friends for anything until you have to. You're saving
Right.
up in case you have something, 1,000%. But it's still a game. What's the game of ask in the same situation? I know that this guy, right, has problems at home.
Mm-hmm.
I know he likes to, go blow off steam. I know he likes to play ball. I know this. So I'm going to fulfill his needs in that sense. I'm going to be the answer to his ask without him even asking. It doesn't have to be a business ask. It could be a personal ask. I know that, he's a big football fan, doesn't like to watch alone, so I know that if we're going to be watching the game, at a bar on Sunday, call him to go. I know, I'm saying, you understand what it is, even if it's, like you said, if it's for an ultimate goal of eventually making a larger ask, that's fine, because I know that at that point he's going to look and he's going to say, wow, look, Jake has been fantastic. He's done this for me, this for me, this for me, this for me, this for me. Sure, I'll look at that when he asks me for that. That's what it is. But it's always the same thing. Look, life is a game of what you ask across the board. I even said it. You meet a girl, you know what your ask is. You know what you're looking for. It's the same kind of concept. Everybody knows, the give and take. Everybody knows what everything is about, what you're looking for, what they're looking for. Just recognizing it and understanding it lets you be better at everything that you're doing. You understand it, much more.
Seems like you spent a lot of time thinking about your exit as well. So like that little thing with the lease,
mm-hmm.
It didn't cost you anything, but you knew it could make you a lot of money or give you some sort of advantage. How often do you use little tools like that in your negotiations today?
We use it all the time. Literally all the time. Right? Sometimes, it's I always look for an angle when I'm doing something that I can, figure out that maybe everybody else is missing, right? Is it a way that I am trying to tweak a situation like a lease, like you said, like that? We bought a building in Boynton Beach a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. and it was 50% occupied. And I knew that it was a medical building, and I knew that I had two pocket tenants who were looking for space in the marketplace. And I knew that they would have liked the space. I knew it was going to work.
Just like your trading card days.
Right. I knew, so I knew it was going to happen. So I knew that did it make a difference when I was negotiating with the owners, and it was a family office out of Maryland somewhere, and they had poorly managed it, and they knew it and everything else. They didn't need to sell. So when they asked me for, an extra $100,000-$200,000 more than really anybody was going to pay for it in the market, I was like, sure. In the end, I gave in because I knew what I had in my pocket, and I knew what I was doing, and I knew what the value was. We sold the building in less than a year, so we knew exactly what the situation was going in. I'm negotiating a building right now, a buy, and it's a different kind of play. It's the people who are selling it are office brokers. So the guys who are selling it are office guys. They own office buildings mostly through TICs. So
1031 stuff?
No, just tenant in commons. They must have 1,000 little investors. I don't even know what they do. And they rolled one TIC to another. Actually, these guys were interesting. They own it. It was a TIC deal, and they bought, and the TIC was distressed and failing. So they bought the note, and it took them like 4 years till they foreclosed on the note of the TIC. So now they own the property, but they're not holders of it. But so they went to a big office broker. The office broker is selling the property, and I'm negotiating to buy it. Now, I'm looking at the deal and I'm like, this is a fascinating deal. Why? 24-foot ceilings. It's got manufacturing in it. It's got, it's 3/4 of the building is government and government credit. And it's facilities. It's like, it's, for lack of a better term, it's industrial facilities, 24-foot ceilings and everything else like this. And the last is a manufacturing plant. Big manufacturing plant. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, but they're selling it to me at an office cap rate level. So I'm negotiating to buy the deal at an office rate. Now, industrial trades, we both know industrial trades, significant though, even
especially today.
Yeah, even this with 7-8 year WALT on industrial, almost 92% occupied, but like I said, credit, government tenants can't get out of it. Really nice. Everything's really great. And I'm negotiating to buy it at an office,
what is that, like 10 cap?
9 in this situation.
That's unheard of. That's basically like what you hope to stabilize an industrial deal at.
Correct. So I'm looking at it. I'm like, why am I not buying this and then just trying to either sell it to an industrial buyer, at a high 7s, even, 8, someone to jump all day long. I mean, something else, or team up with them. I'm like, this is the kind of thing. So what I realize is a lot of people are in the box with everything that they do. They're never thinking strategically. So they're never looking at the little, twists and tweaks that they can do, put in something you can put to a lease, something that you understand strategically getting into something. They're always looking really from within the frame of a box. How can I do this? What is, but the same way everyone else. So when you're looking at something the way everyone else is looking at it, the price is the same, everything's the same, you never really move from that, and it's not what I do. Like, I guess, kind of going from where I was, doing these urban deals like the Sunday House, which we zoned, I sold it. I was buying, I owned tons and tons of office buildings in the Midwest. And I was, converting using historic tax credits and other types of tax credits to convert to, retail, office, apartments, and hotels. And even that strategy was great until the pricing got too high, and we did 10 million feet of it, but then the market became too high for that. But again, I was looking at these buildings, and I was looking at markets, and I'm like, well, how is everybody else looking at them? And yeah, people are looking at them and saying, well, these are old buildings. How am I going to make it work? And they didn't understand the tax credit game. So I spent enough time educating myself on the tax credit game to understand that the government was going to pay for so much of this, but the government really was going to put in the equity.
Yep.
And then I had depreciation. That was an interesting play over there. And I had, credits. It was so many other tax-related strategy that existed around this type of stuff that just most people didn't understand. So, we got involved in that. Air rights we sold one building in Kentucky, where we sold basically the equivalent of air rights. We donated the air rights to a non-for-profit. Just all these crazy strategies that you would use, just looking at things differently than everybody else. Even today, you and I were talking a little beforehand. We have two real big sides of our portfolio. We buy heavily distressed office buildings, right? Which is, we're buying them directly from, generally from banks or from, a lot of them are short sales, but they're owner assisted short sales. And we buy old hotels that we convert to workforce housing. And I'm doing and have done some of the weirdest financing on some of these deals. I'm doing LIHTC deals within conversions. Never, that's not a strategy.
Within a hotel conversion to residential.
Within a hotel to residential conversion, doing it as a low-income housing tax credit deal.
I do want to talk about what you're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
So part of your strategy is not identifying creative real estate and deals, but it's in the structure and it's in the creative financing. So I want to talk about how you were doing that first in hospitality, and then we'll get into the office side. Mm-hmm. But on the LIHTC side, like, what does that mean? I don't do LIHTC. I don't know what that is. So explain that.
Okay, so basically, the largest problem that the country has right now in the housing and real estate segment is workforce housing, which there's we'll call two categories of workforce housing. Okay, subsidized and unsubsidized. And the line is very thin between the two. If you have somebody who, of, people who, who Section 8 or welfare or anything else like that, people who are poor, can't afford housing, they get a voucher from the government. There's a waiting list to get vouchers. It's not a simple process, to get that. That's one level of tenant who is struggling. Okay. The next level tenant has an income that's below a certain level as a percentage of AMI, which is what it is. And they've got an income below a level and they would like to be able to afford housing somewhere. The problem is that as construction costs have risen and the cost of land has risen, that's caused the properties themselves to have all risen, the cost of constructing these, properties to rise, which means the rents, that are needed to make sense of deals have risen. So most pieces of land that are available in all around are really just available for market rate developers. If you have a piece of land in Boca Raton, Florida, you're not going to turn around and say, okay, I'm going to build low income housing.
Right.
Because it's never going to make sense. You'll make much more money, doing the opposite. So you're not going to do it. There's no incentive for you to do it. It just doesn't make sense. So you're not going to do it. So that's a big chunk of the marketplace right now. What we, looked at is, so we see that, we recognize it to be a problem. I went back to school, to get my my doctorate because I have enough degrees that I don't use at this point, I guess. Anyway, and my doctoral thesis, which I'm writing now, is on workforce housing and alternatives to credit. It's basically using different types of psychosocial factors to predict whether or not people will pay their rents. Are they empathetic? What do they have? And different things like this. And I cross-reference them to things like paying cell phone bills.
Is there a reason other than not having money that people wouldn't pay their rent?
Yeah. So, for instance, moral disengagement. You have a generation right now, you see this college protests and everything like this. People who don't, they care about what they care about.
Well, in California with the squatting, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
You care about what you care about, but you don't care about this. But how's this? Take another example. You and I, you live in my two-family house. You're the second tenant in a two-family house. And you know that if you can't pay your rent, I can't pay my mortgage. You know me. We're buddies. Yeah. We live in this, next door. If you, are morally disengaged, you don't care.
Right.
That's not your issue. If you are a different kind of personality, you're empathetic, religious, the more religious you are, these are factors that we pull in to predict whether or not you'll pay your rents.
Interesting.
I wrote algorithms literally like I was trading. I wrote algorithms to determine this.
Aren't there like these crazy housing rules that like?
Yeah,
so
they don't help.
Right?
No, the crazy housing rules don't help because what they do the opposite.
Right.
Because so here's where your problem lies. So we're a credit based country. everything we do is FICO score based. But what people don't understand is FICO, Fair Isaac's company, is a public New York Stock Exchange company worth tens and tens of billions of dollars. It's been around 100 years. It's not a government entity. It's nothing of the sort. And it's their job to make sure that they control the narrative about credit, right? However, my kid has great credit because I gave them a credit card when they were little attached to my credit. The bills get paid. Suddenly they're 19 years old or 20 years old. They got great credit and they're functional idiots. They've never had a job. They can't do anything. However, you got a guy who's an HVAC tech.
Right.
Now, that guy's going to work forever. He's going to have no problems finding work. He's going to be nicely paid. He's got a solid blue collar job. But 4 years ago, he hurt his back. And he was out for 5 or 6 months, and his unsympathetic boss fired him.
Right.
And he was late on a car payment or something else like this, and suddenly his credit is shot. Or he's an immigrant, he's old school, keeps the money in the mattress, doesn't really have a credit profile of any sort or whatever else it is. That guy is going to have a problem renting an apartment, but my kid won't, which kind of makes no sense. So here's what happens with credit specifically and why this becomes an issue. So credit as a barometer is now an issue because all these people can't rent because, as I said, the prices are going up and up and up for everyone. So even on a low income side, right, you need to use government financing to get anything built. You need to use government, or institutional equity. So one of the two things are requiring you to do this. Now, both of these things are using credit as a barometer because that's safe. That's the CYA situation of everything. You're covering your ass because you're using credit. Because if you don't use credit, they want to know why you didn't use credit to determine what, whether this person was a good risk, right? And if you use it, you're like, well, I don't know. I didn't know the guy was going to fail. He had good credit, right? And then you're covered. Of course, during the crash, it didn't matter what your credit was. Everything went to pot very quickly and defaults were very high. So what LIHTC does and all these different, programs, but LIHTC specifically, the government says, okay, here's the deal. If you're willing to build or renovate, two different programs, a complex, let's say you're going to build from the ground up, you're going to build these apartments. We are going to give you a tax credit. There's 4% and there's 9%. 9% are very, very difficult to get, right? It's 9% of the entire cost, structure, which is one way to do it. A little more complicated than that, but that's a basic way of looking at it. So it basically comes out to be 90% of what you would need to do the equity of the deal. It's what you're going to get in that, of the equity, yes. But the rest comes in from other grants. The only people who ever really get these are nonprofits, especially those politically associated. If you look at the cost of building a 9% deal, the cost is the market rate cost plus. It's not meant to be a phenomenally, good product for the worker. It's basically, it's a giveaway. I'm not a huge fan of the 9% credit. I don't think it makes sense.
Okay.
4% credits are the other end. A 4% credit basically comes out to be about, give or take, about 30% of the equity in a deal. So let's say you're building from the ground up.
Do you have to pay that back, or it's just kind of like a grant?
No, it's a grant. In exchange, what you're doing is you are putting a lure. You're putting on a restriction on that property for 15 or 30 years, depending upon some other factors. And you're getting breaks for this. So if you have a project where it's going to cost you, you got the land cheap, let's say, and you're going to build an apartment, and it's going to cost you $200,000 to build the apartment. I'm being kind. So the way the structure is going to work is, basically $60,000 of that is going to come off as a credit, as a tax credit, where, again, it's complex what happens, but it's being sold and everything else. You're basically pocketing about 30%. So about $60,000 is going to come to you that way. About half the cost is going to be in a bond, that you're going to get, long-term financing or, agency, type of debt. You're going to get that over there. Then there's some gap that you can fill in. Then there's some equity. And in exchange, you're taking a rental rate that's going to be, let's call it, 50 or 60% of AMI in the area. So if you're in an area, like, Tampa, it's probably going to be, give or take $1,100, a month, for a one bedroom, going up, a couple $100, each bedroom, over there. And you're agreeing to a restriction that gets adjusted every year, what that rate is that you're willing to take from the tenant. So the tenant's paying you, it's like a regular rental, but they're paying a highly reduced rate to what the market rent is in the area. On the flip side, you got into the deal very cheap, your spread is going to be better, and you're justifying why to do it. It's still not a great model for market rate developers. Market rate real estate guys are looking at this and saying, I make much more money. I don't care about the equity. There's plenty of money for me available. I make more money. I'm going to put it out there. So they do it. I always, as you kind of get an idea about me, I'm always looking for a different way to turn it.
Yep.
Right? Also, at one point in life, you learn, we used to have a saying on the wall in the office, it's not about the money, but it's about the money. Right? It's true. But a lot of the things I've built over time are about doing well and doing good at the same time. We really like to reach out to markets that are different. And over here, I feel that workforce housing is a big problem. It's not going to get any better. And I feel like there's a solution that's staring us in the face. And the solution is something that you deal with all the time. You see it all the time, which are outdated hotels.
Yep.
So
by the way, a lot of these outdated hotels, I think they're almost obsolete. It's like an old computer. And the only people that are using it are the people that are desperate to use it. And that's all they can get. Because with the standardization of hotels and all these brands, a lot of these other hotels don't fit that mold. And what's happening is the mom and pop owners are effectively turning them into some sort of long form housing or short-term housing. And it's mostly to traveling workers or different people that maybe can't qualify for normal rent because of their credit.
So Wyndham built a brand. So the hotel brands are what a great business. These guys have it, down to a science. We all know that.
Top line fees, baby.
They know it. So they their whole entire game is, how do I come up with a segment of the market so that I can breach my non-compete to everybody else in a specific marketplace.
That's right.
And go to my people who will always build whatever the next great thing is that I'm doing. So Wyndham actually came out with what when they categorize it, lower end, lower tier, extended stay product. And their argument when they put out this product, which is literally built for people who are exactly what you described, the transient, someone who's going through basically people who can't get housing for whatever the reason.
Yeah.
They're like, no, that's not what we're going after. What we're going after is construction workers who are working on infrastructure projects.
Right.
And are going to be, for 21 days on average, going to be located in different marketplaces. We're like, yeah, that doesn't exist. There's no such thing. You're just making this up, which is exactly what they're doing. But they also recognize something that we recognize, which is the cost of getting into these deals, right? The cost of getting into the market, et cetera. It makes sense, even from a construction standpoint, to put them in smaller locations. So what we realize is something, we're getting is that the problem's staring us in the face. They built these clunkers of hotels starting in the 1970s and through the early 90s, probably, maybe even a little more on each side, where you build a full service hotel in a solid market, maybe a suburban market that, at the time, it maybe seemed like a good idea because everyone was doing it, to have full kitchens, everything
big
going
ballrooms,
on. Huge 30,000 feet of conference space. The problem is Howard Johnson's didn't need that.
Right.
Ramada doesn't need that. Yet that's what you have. And to take that hotel right now and to turn it into something better, you just can't do it because, Marriott and Hilton are going to build a new product instead of that.
It's still an ugly old oil tanker. And no matter how much lipstick you put on that thing, it's not going to be attractive. But also the uses are no longer in demand. You're not having AIG going to do a big 30,000 square foot meeting at a Ramada. It's just not happening.
It's not happening. Right.
So are you taking those, as I call them, big oil tankers, or are you focusing more on like the 3-story extended stay America, exterior corridor, maybe motel situation?
Both. So here's basically what it is. So I love the clunker.
Why?
Because it makes no economic sense for anybody else. And I'm buying it off of the income. I'm not buying it off of what else is there. So when they're trying to sell it, someone said, well, selling it on the land value and everything else like this, I'm not interested. I can't play. But when someone's sitting there and saying, look, it makes it makes, $1 million a year. What are you going to pay for it? And I'm working off of that. We have a very different conversation.
Boom. Yeah.
We have a very different conversation. I'm looking at it. So I don't like to combine rooms. That's a money losing strategy where I come from.
Let's talk about that, because everyone I know who's tried to do this, it was a big thing during COVID. Everyone's like, I was in hotels. Now I'm going to buy all these crappy hotels and turn them into multifamily. Every single one of them was telling me I'm converting a 300-room hotel to a 150-unit apartment building.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
Nope. It's a mistake. And the reason why it's a mistake is because I'm trying to get somebody into a rent that they can afford. Let's take a number. Let's say it's $1,000, right? Be it subsidized, unsubsidized, whatever it is. Let's take a number of $1,000. I'm trying to get them into a $1,000 unit. My first concern is that I get them into a nice building that has the amenities, that has everything else. I tell them I can give you everything you ever wanted. I can give you a pool. I can give you a doormat. I can give you free internet. I can give you furnishings. I can give you no security deposit. I give you whatever you wanted. The only thing I can't give you is size. Right? But I went to Japan. I studied what they're doing in all these other markets as well to see different things. If the only thing I can't give you is size, but I can give you the $1,000, and I buy a building and I combine units, I'm not getting $2,000 for that unit that I just combined. So I'm getting $1,200. Why would I possibly lose my real value add that I'm putting in over here? Plus, it's defeating the whole purpose.
And it's expensive.
It's a fortune, but it's defeating the whole purpose. The whole beauty of this is not that I am making a 200-unit building, 80 units, but they're bigger and they're this. That's not the purpose. The purpose is that I'm filling a need. And right now there's a big problem. And if you're looking to fill a problem, you've got to fill a problem for maximum number of people. You're not only trying to fill a problem for, a much smaller number, but feel that you've accomplished more because you've built it bigger and you've done that. That doesn't make sense. Like, I fight with housing authorities all the time. Some of them still are stuck on minimum square footages. This is something that was a big thing in the past. And they'll give you minimum square footages and they're like, oh, a 1-bedroom has to be 863 feet and a 2-bedroom has to be a minimum of 1,200 feet. Now, it's funny, but in Manhattan, that's not the case.
Right.
Yet they're telling you that should be the case, in North Carolina, somewhere in Raleigh. But that doesn't make any sense. Why?
So what does it cost you typically to convert a standard 350 square foot hotel room to a multifamily unit?
So it depends. It depends on the condition. It depends on what's going on. It depends on everything else. But I would say anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000, depending on what's going on, or $20,000 to $40,000, depending upon what's going on.
What are you doing with the public space?
So also very interesting. So there's a couple of different models that we use. We're working on a project right now, which is really interesting, which would be senior housing. And what we're doing over there, and again, it's getting creative, but again, so it's senior and senior lower income stuff. So the question is whether you then, go from independent living to have an AL component and then go over there. So we've got extra space to do it. We were working on a project in Dallas where we were going to do something really interesting. It was a senior project, and we were going to put a school in there, a nursing school. And we were basically giving them the space for free.
It's like a retail tenant.
Yeah, but we were giving them the space. We weren't even charging. We're taking a piece of the company. It was really interesting. But what we were doing is we were getting all the students they were bringing in. We were going to be doing their rotations through the property, and we were getting all this extra labor.
Wow.
For free.
And you were operating
for doing this. Yeah. So that was the place. So yeah, now that was the interesting, thing. So it's something that we're actually working on right now. It's kind of an interesting play. Sometimes you have to get creative. I was working on a deal, which we didn't end up buying in Omaha, Nebraska. And I think it was a Ramada. And it was exactly what you described. It was massive, 34,000 feet of ballrooms and all these things and then they had a water park. They spent $6 million or so and built a water park indoors.
That was a big thing.
And the problem they didn't recognize, aside from the fact that it's Nebraska and the winter time, it's nice to say we have a water park, but it's still cold, even coming out of this. The cost to heat it, the water and everything else like this, drained the whole property of any money they
Really?
possibly made. Sure,
Wow.
it was a Ramada.
Yep.
And they'd renovated the Ramada, and it didn't make a difference. They still couldn't get an
Yep.
ADR above like $75 a night. It didn't
Right.
make a difference what they did. So, so we were trying to figure out, what do you do with this? And so I had a whole game plan. Basically, we were giving the water park to a water park operator, right? Who was going to let us, they were going to go out and charge like a membership, like it was a club.
Yeah.
And they were going to let us utilize it, for free,
Yeah.
for our people, or for like, $5 a month, like some stupid low number. And they were going to take it. And right before we were, getting ready to, to close on the transaction, they sold it from under us, literally, to next door neighbor, who was I don't know, it was a DoubleTree or another hotel, who bought it. The owner decided that he was going to make it happen. He was going to make the deal work as a hotel. So probably can buy it back now if I wanted
100%. Hotel people are very optimistic.
Always very
and
optimistic.
nostalgic for those old clunkers.
So what we do is, so we have two types. We do the, definitely I've got the 2 and 3 story walk up, with elevators usually, but the 2 or 3 story exterior corridor, what we'll call
those
crappy,
seem easier, but I guess there's a lot of things that people can do with those.
So they are easier in one way. And again, you're solving for a problem. So as much as you can do in different places, it's that. But everything is what you described. I'm about the creative finance in it, and there's still some intrinsic problems in the marketplace. So there really is no bridge lending programs for this stuff. There's no great program. So I actually am able to use agency debt to get out of these products. So I'm able to go to Fannie, Freddie, and HUD once I've done this and once this is existing, which is really, look, you're in the hospitality business.
To get out of them, not to buy them.
To get out of them. So, or to refinance out my money into cash. So basically what happens is, if I do a deal and I build a, 200 to 400 unit property, it doesn't matter the size, it doesn't make a difference. And I'm leased up and I'm operating and everything else like this. The agencies, will, especially if I've changed zoning, which we've talked in the past, if I change zoning and get it going, the agencies will take me out.
What if you haven't changed zoning?
If you haven't changed zoning, the agencies won't.
Okay.
So
that's a key factor.
It's a key factor. It's interesting. Actually, the agencies do have a little exception. They will if the zoning exists, even if you haven't changed it. So if I'm by right allowed to change zoning, but I haven't because of impact fees, which actually happens in certain marketplaces where they try to get you with that, then the agencies will still fund it. But they want it. So one of the things that would be nice is if the agencies would come in and say, look, you can keep hospitality zoning and you can do this. That would be one way. I understand why they don't want to. There'll be a lot of abuse, especially from small hotel operators right now. And that group is definitely not necessarily, always on the up and up.
100%.
And they would have a problem. It would be a problem for the agencies. I see that. So if here the developers are committing, they're saying, look, we're making this multi. We're doing everything to make this about the user. So then I understand that's a fair play. But what they don't have is a bridge program. So I'm stuck in these situations, either going to organizations, who have
a debt fund,
stuff, or I'm going to a fund, of some sort, and then
does it ever pencil to just buy it all cash?
Yes,
maybe
it does. But, it depends what you're paying on the debt. Even if you're paying, remember, sometimes if you're paying,
10% debt is cheaper
than your equity. Yeah, exactly. And again, remember, I know what my exit looks like. So I know that once I'm filled up, I know I'm going to take everything out of it anyway. I know I'm going to be able to take everything out of it. One of the reasons being is our entry prices. The reason why I like this model is we're not buying property for $200,000 and $300,000 a key like I described before. I'm buying old clunker hotels.
You're also buying them at hotel cap rates.
I'm buying at hotel cap rates, correct.
Or worse.
Or worse.
Because people are just trying to get out of these big clunkers.
Distress. I'm buying at distress. I'm buying from banks. I'm buying at other things. Remember, I'm buying things that you'll look at and say, "Oh, of course not. I can't make any
100%.
sense."
I'm just hitting delete. Now I'm going to forward them all to you, and we can do them together.
There we go.
Now
exactly.
you know.
All day long.
What deals then in this space? We'll get to office in a second. What deals won't you do?
Okay. So you've got to first understand the flags. Some of the flags will let you buy them out for a price, and other flags are super difficult. Interestingly enough, it's probably the reverse of what you would expect. The smaller the flag, the more difficult they usually are. Because they might have a 9-year contract sitting there with sleep in, remaining. They're like, no. You want it, you can buy us out for exactly what we would make over 9 years.
Yep.
For that. But a Residence Inn might turn around and say, look, there's 2 years left on the agreement, but we've given them a $3 million PIP. And even then, we don't know what's going to happen because we really have 2 other competitors we want to open up next to it. So if you're going to pull it out of service from us, and we can open up a competitor down the road, we can make a deal. Like they're smarter about it. So you gotta understand, who the flags are. I look at the zoning; it's a big thing. I've had the problem where I can't get the zoning, where I'm fighting and fighting. So I do work that. So I won't play where I can't do it. And I always have to look at 2 other things: inventory. What's in the market on the housing side? Just because we know there's a housing shortage doesn't mean every hotel is located in a marketplace exactly where there's housing related issues. So what are the rentals trading for versus that? Not to say, by the way, that you can't rent something at a higher price, even smaller than people are renting apartments in the market because they can't get the apartments. They can't get in because they don't have security deposits always. They don't have credit. They don't have the factors that we described.
Right.
So that is an issue that you always have to look at. But I want to know, I'd like something that's in a nice AMI market, where I see that there's, possibilities. I like something that's close to an employment center. One of the things with hotels, you definitely see it. How many hotels are in, Waukegan, or they're in markets that you've never even heard of, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller. You've got secondary, tertiary, there's, quaternary market. There's things you never even heard of, that you have hotels in and motels in, how many I've seen in the Dakotas.
Location was ignored, I think, in the 90s and 80s in hospitality.
Yes.
Or the building was just so cheap, it didn't really matter. And now the land has become more valuable. Maybe the demand that they thought doesn't justify the price of the hotel. And the flags really, potentially cause a problem because you're kind of stuck with this thing, and maybe the highest and best use isn't really a hotel.
It generally is not. When all is said and done, we're real estate guys. We're looking at the underlying value of the property, right? It's not that hotels aren't a great business and don't make money. They're an operating business. Hospitality is an operating business. And multifamily, there's a reason why, so many immigrants over years got into multifamily versus other areas. It's an operating business. And it's difficult in only to a point. It's simple to another point. Hospitality has a million moving parts. It's no different than running a manufacturing plant and everything else. You have so many pieces, that are moving, and it's not necessarily consistent. And, OTAs changed the whole business, and everything else changed the business and changed the technology around it. So, what we're doing is we're simplifying it in different ways, but understanding what's the underlying real estate. If I'm buying in Orlando, I'm understanding what the housing situation is in Orlando. I already know what the hospitality situation is in Orlando. What's the housing situation? And what's it costing to build because everything else is booming? And that's what we're always looking for. What am I getting into it for?
And what are you targeting from a NOI standpoint on your operations? So you operate as well. So when you're looking at a deal, what are your margins?
I would never even remotely look at anything that I couldn't get to a double-digit cap rate, fairly easily.
But are these conversions similar to typical multifamily operating metrics, or are they more expensive, less expensive?
Really, really good question. They're similar, but sometimes there's a couple of twists. Depending upon what we're doing on the low income side, there's tax breaks. So I might have a property tax abatement that goes along with whatever we're doing, which changes that metric. Exterior corridor versus interior corridor. We talk about clunkers. Downside of clunkers is they never really thought about the fact that heating or air conditioning those properties, that you were getting very little rent in and everything else like this are costing you a fortune.
Yeah.
So, figuring out, if there's costs that we can pass through or we can't, because very often these things are, one price fits all type of situations.
Right.
It's, we're eating a lot of the operating expenses. So we did do a lot of software work internally that allows us to monitor different things. So, when you'll do these hotels, we do what they do in Europe a lot, where the ACs shut off when you leave the room, the lights shut off, and you do these things tied.
You're doing that in the multifamily conversions.
Yeah. You have to, as much as it's a bit of a pain in the butt for the people, you have to. But on top of that, there's also green programs that we get from some of the government financing because we do that.
Yeah.
But it's a real savings, for us and everybody, along the lines. So, if you're in a bigger clunker, the operating expenses are higher. If you're in what you described before, that catwalk
Motel,
type of motel, it's going to operate like a typical multifamily.
And what would that be? What margin would you charge?
We're generally looking at anything between 30 and 40%, depending upon what's going on. On the clunkers, you'll operate probably in the 50% type of range. Sometimes a little better, sometimes a little worse, depending upon taxes and situations like that.
Let's talk about office.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear about all these office buildings that are being sold for like $0, $10, like very low price per square foot. And they're just like a big behemoth. Like I could almost describe them as a extinct oil tanker. But you're the guy that's actually buying some of this stuff. So maybe talk to us about what the strategy is and some of the deals that you think are interesting that you've done recently.
So we currently have about 5 million feet of this in our portfolio, and we're expanding. We picked up 1 million feet this quarter alone.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And, we've had about 13 million, but we go up and down on the portfolio based upon things. We bought a lot of medical starting about 7 years ago, and we've been selling into this move, the medical, because medical is very hot. So we're contrarian, I guess, in a lot of things. I guess I'm contrarian. Because everybody hates it, that for us is the time to really, be, balls to the wall. And the reason is different. I won't buy everywhere, but we like specific marketplaces. And I don't only mean specific cities. We like a certain certain type of property. So, what we're seeing now is a pricing reset in the market. I haven't seen anything remotely like this since probably the RTC days. Resolution Trust. That was the last time you really saw this, where, everyone is sitting on the sidelines now. You hear there's a lot of dry powder. Everyone's waiting for multi or they're waiting for these markets to tank so that they can come in and buy distress. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, even in the multi market to all these people. Equity will lose equity in multi deals. If you have floating debt, you probably lost your equity already in a lot of these deals and things of that nature. Yep. Maybe the market will bail you out. Maybe it won't. But the banks are perfectly safe in whatever their debt level is on multifamily in general.
Okay.
Right? It's generally not going below that 65% level that the banks are into everything for. Doesn't matter if rents are stable or if rents are, up a couple of percentage points or down. You're not seeing you're not seeing the panic, and you're not seeing the distress.
In office, it's a little bit different though, right?
In office, it's the only asset class where the lenders have picked up their hands and said, please, what will you pay? Mm-hmm. Take it. Like hotels, it's an operating business in a different manner, right? I'm not a believer in office as a long-term hold product. Interestingly enough, because it costs too much money and it's too unforeseen on what it's going to cost you over time. So basically, if you're getting into it thinking I'm going to be cash flowing beautifully for the next 10 years, you're forgetting the fact that you've got to renew tenants. And you've got to put money into it. So it's unpredictable. And that's a constant. So that changes the dynamic of what it is. I'm a huge believer in office as a value add proposition, especially when you're getting it in pricing that makes no economic sense whatsoever for everybody else. So what we're seeing right now in this pricing reset is deals where, one of two things are going on. And I won't buy completely vacant. The places where I've gotten hurt the most are completely vacant office buildings.
So you've got some cash flow.
Right? You've got to have some cash flow. You've got to have upside. And there's got to have been money put into the building over time where someone else is taking the bath. Unfortunately, it's going to be someone, and that is what it is. Right? So you find these deals in good cities, big cities, Dallas, Phoenix, all these good areas. Chicago, we just bought big in Chicago. I like places like LA and New York, but the pricing hasn't dropped enough yet.
Mm-hmm.
But you look in some of these marketplaces and you're seeing things that were great markets at one point, and maybe it's the work from home mentality that caused a big drop off, and people didn't renew leases and things of that nature. It's not lasting.
Well, how do you know? Like, take a market like Chicago. I can make an argument that it's blue state. There's problems in the city. It's fucking cold. All this stuff. Maybe it's not coming back? What would you say?
So what I will say to you is, I've seen New York through the 70s. I've seen Chicago. I've seen the 80s and 90s. I've seen the crash from, the internet days when everything crashed. And I've seen the last crashes. I've been throughout, and these are cyclical. Chicago is a great city. Chicago has horrible politics.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it will forever have horrible politics, but even around the politics, it will still be a great city. The question is twofold. Will it go back to the pricing that it had a half a dozen years ago? Or will it go back to enough of a pricing that will kill it?
But you're buying on a basis that doesn't matter.
So, we just bought in Chicago. We paid $23 a square foot on a building that's like 2 buildings down from the old Marshall Fields. It's 558,000 feet. It was the family who owned it, the fund who owned it, put $135 million into it. We spent 13. 40% occupied. We bought it at a double-digit cap rate on the existing cash flow at 40%. All we have is upside. We paid less than the rents we're getting in the building. I think are $40 a foot. We paid $23 to buy. This is economics none of us have ever seen before. It makes no sense whatsoever. But it was a lender-assisted sale. The owners said, look, they go, we can't put money in. We can't sign a tenant because it doesn't make a difference. We're going to sign tenants. We're not going to put the money in.
It's crazy you're getting $40 a foot and you only paid $23 a foot.
Yeah.
Now it's not fully occupied.
Right.
But even if you can occupy 60 or 70%, it's like a home run. Grand
slam. So also don't forget, I got the dirt for free. I got the structure for free. And I bought the cash flows, if you look at it from that standpoint.
Yeah. And the maintenance isn't going to eat you alive because it was well maintained during their ownership.
Right. So I don't have to go in and put $1 million into roofs and $2 million into elevators. All brand new.
And so what's your strategy? So you're going in there. Now, what are you doing? You're not going to own it forever.
Right. So look, we could have looked at conversion and we looked at every type of angle and everything like this. Nope. We're literally going to the market and we are, going to tenants and we're like, look, we're going to cut you a great deal. We're going to cut you a great deal. We're also betting a little bit on the Chicago market.
Mm-hmm.
It's right down the block from Google, and we're looking at these things and we're saying, look, there's a whole bunch of metrics and reasons right by the train. The work from home business is stopping. We are seeing the companies telling you, get your butt back to work.
I agree. Yep.
And the first beneficiaries of that are going to be office. They've already taken the hit. We don't need to fill the building. We need to fill it more. We can sell it to value adds. One of the reasons we're able to buy some of this stuff is this. When you go to the marketplaces, institutions can't buy buildings that are at this occupancy level. So they're not going to buy 40% occupied buildings. REITs aren't coming in and buying. They just can't.
Headline risk.
They're just not doing it.
Yeah.
So it's now, do I think they're right? No, they're wrong, but it doesn't matter. And they're also not operators. So, that's problem number one. They're not buying it for that. Problem number two is what are they going to do? They're going to hire CBRE to fill their building or JLL or one of these other brokerage firms. And the brokerage firm has so many other competing interests on the street to fill. Why are they concentrating on this? So they'd be relying on so many other people to get the work done. It doesn't make sense for the institution. So they're not touching it right now.
How long do you think you hold this for?
2 years, 24 months.
And who do you sell it to?
At that point, it'll sell to either an institution, depending upon how full we've gotten, or it'll sell to value add guys, who at that point have come back into the market.
Right.
So number one, the institutions aren't buying, and we see they're not buying. Number two is we're buying above a level that like small individuals will buy. So you're not buying like $2 and $3 million deals. We're buying larger stuff,
but still below what Blackstone's doing.
Correct, but Blackstone is not buying this. They've got the same problem. So if it gets to a point, Blackstone will buy it. They'll buy it for more and larger, but they're not buying it yet.
Well, they'll buy it from you.
The other problem is that people like Blackstone, as a perfect example, have gotten hurt in these markets like Chicago. So they're into the markets at $250 and $300 a foot. They can't. You can't pay $2 million for your house that's now selling for $250,000 and start buying them for $250. You can't do it.
Mentally,
you just can't. You can't come to it. And they also have a problem within their fund that it causes them, if they do it, to have to revalue the other stuff that they're holding. So no one wants to do it. So the pool that we're competing against are generally people who haven't played very much in these specific marketplaces, have an ability to do it, are operators as well, and can close, and that the banks trust. It's all these different factors. And so the pools are very small.
And you're getting debt, like traditional bank debt on this?
We have the ability to buy them for cash. And, if we can get debt, we try to take debt. So, and good news facilities, if we can try to get, that's always a very important thing. The nice thing about that is very often the lenders understand that if you sign a tenant and it's going to cost you $75 or $100 in good news money for that tenant, but the tenant's paying $40, it's accretive to earnings. They're doing that because it makes tons of sense for them in terms of a value standpoint.
And are the lenders completely writing off doing office deals, or are they still looking at the nuance of your deal? They're saying, hold on, this makes sense.
I'm seeing mostly the lenders that are selling at these levels are out.
Right.
I think they'll come back soon. Honestly, I do. But in general, they're not the ones. They're not like the big money center banks are the ones who I'm seeing are the ones who are really throwing up their hands and saying, take it. Right. And it's great from where we sit. But you also have to understand the opportunity. You have to understand how to play it. You have to understand how to work it. You have to understand what's happening. But I'm seeing things that, I understand why they're happening. I understand that the lenders have to get rid of it. They want it off their books. It used to be like a joke, when Fred would leave, the company, they would then sell it and they'd all turn and blame Fred. It was Fred's fault.
Yeah.
So you'd have like someone like a fall guy. What the big banks have learned is that it's a small percentage of their overall portfolio. PNC Bank is not going out of business because they're selling off, $500 million, of loss on office buildings right now.
And when you, I played tennis with a few of these
underwriting.
guys, they're like celebrating that they sold it to you for $13 a foot.
They're thrilled.
They're like, oh, we're getting rid of this thing? Oh,
Right.
This is great.
Right. And it's funny. And then, and then afterwards, when we sell it and we sell it for $100 a foot, and, they're like, you sold it for $100, but what happened? They're asking all these questions and we're jumping up and down. And the guys who bought it are like, whoo, we just bought for $100 a foot. Look how cheap. It used to be 300. And we're like, great.
But that's like mid-cycle deals. I think what happened, the last cycle just dragged out so long and then COVID messed things up.
Yes, it did.
But when you're in that middle cycle, you make money. The guy who buys it's going to make money, but it can't keep happening.
It's not. I think this is a 2-year opportunity. And I said it, and it's not even, we had been talking and you had asked me, what's better? Is this better than the housing play? No, the housing play is a much better long-term, business. It's a much better long-term solution. It's a much better, it's not going to change, in my opinion, economically.
Because it's just multifamily, and multifamily's historically been a winner.
It's basically taking what we have as, the hotel business, what makes the hotel business interesting is it's a constant flow of asset that's going to have to be redone. It's the same thing. What you have going on, we had the big clunkers, that came about. It doesn't matter. You're going to have obsolescence coming from, from stuff every 20 years. Whatever happens, it's going to happen. It's going to be about that.
100%.
So we're basically, that solution of taking those, obsolete hotels off the market, creating an alternative use for them, making them work in another manner, and going from there. It's gonna remain because we're able to get in at a cheaper level. Just doesn't make a difference. So we see that as that's a great long-term strategy. That's where we really see the huge growth. Office it's a blip. It's an anomaly. We happen to recognize what's going on. We're good. We have a good ground game. We're good at understanding it. We're good at getting in. We're good at, we know how to lease up. We know how to make it interesting. We know how to tell the story. We know how to get the excitement going. And we're also going to have huge benefit from what I consider to be cap rate compression from what I'm expecting to be a growing economy. So I expect the economy is going to grow. I expect you're going to have people coming back to work. And I expect interest rates will actually drop and stay low for the next bunch of years. And because of all these factors, you're going to start seeing, even office cap rates, falling back down, to levels that will look like real estate. They're not gonna be 5 caps, that you might have had in like a downtown Chicago. That's not happening yet. But they're also not going to be 10 caps, and they're probably not going to be 8s either. They're probably going to be lower. And because of that, there's going to be money to be made just on the compression and the opportunity. And when that starts to happen, more banks get into the business and more distressed funds get into the business because they start to see the opportunity. And I know a group who's buying distress, and they're like literally just sitting on it. They're not even leasing it up. They're not doing anything. They're buying for cash. They don't care.
Just the arbitrage.
They just know the arbitrage is coming. Just traders. Correct.
Let's leave it there. I ask all the guests on the podcast the same traditional closing question. And that's, what's your favorite hotel?
My favorite hotel to come stay at?
Yeah.
I'll say the DoubleTree Hotel across the street from my office because I know the guys who own it.
We own that. I should have converted that deal to multi, actually. Yeah, that's an interesting story. There's untapped potential in the parking lots, and maybe another opportunity for you is, we've built hotels a couple times in the parking lot. We tried to do it there. The town is pushing back a little bit, but these big parking lots are underutilized as well. So that could be your third strategy.
There you go.
But other than the DoubleTree, what's your favorite hotel?
I guess it depends upon, somewhat upon the city, that I go to. I love the Waldorf in Orlando. I go a lot. I have a lot of property there. I go a lot. I think they did a beautiful job.
Yep.
I like it across the board, from restaurants to everything.
Bull and Bear.
Bull and Bear.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Right.
Yeah.
I stayed down in downtown Miami. I stayed at the Four Seasons.
The one on Brickell?
Yeah, the one in Brickell.
I haven't been there in a while.
So
I think that could be, I know they're going to, same owner, they're going to renovate it.
They have to. So the problem with the hotel is they have to renovate it.
Yeah.
The thing I like, and I dislike the fact that the Four Seasons has no real loyalty program, because I stay in St. Louis there a lot. I have stuff there again as well. And I like,
they're so good. Four Seasons is the best.
But the service is so good.
Yep.
And I like it. And I like the fact that Equinox is inside the building.
Yep.
So it's something for me right over there that I love. And then I have an old historical nostalgia from my youth of the Fontainebleau, in Miami Beach, because I spent so much of my youth. So
that's where the College Story part of it took place.
Sure, definitely. Definitely over there, and for so long. And I'm an architecture guy. I love
Morris,
architecture.
Lapidus,
Yep. So it was just such a unique place with such great memories, including even as a kid. I remember they used to do Wide World of Sports.
So
they used
cool.
to do like all the things that the athletes would come and they'd have it up. They have all the competitions and so I remember that as a kid. So I think I have a nostalgia for it. Realistically, the high end of the hotel market has changed over the years. It's gotten so high end, so luxurious. Everywhere. Like I said, I was just in Japan. It was crazy. The service has become a totally different level.
Yep.
Although finding the staff in the States is not the same and not the same ease and everything else. But I love to see that. But I'd love to see also from a business standpoint, because we travel so much for business. I'd love to see what the business hotels are doing, to see how they're operating and what's going on over there. I love the historic conversions because I have a thing in my heart for them, because I'm, a big deal. In San Antonio, I stayed at the St. Anthony's downtown, which was a great conversion that they did. Which was very
Next time you go to San Antonio, there's Hotel Emma.
I know it.
Which our friends and partners did. It's owned by a billionaire. Unbelievable adaptive reuse program. Some of the best I've ever seen.
It is. It's also on American Express's Fine Hotel and Resorts down there.
Yep.
It's great. And it's a cool city. So I like it very much when we go.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the podcast. This was epic.
That was great. Anytime.
Hey, everyone. It's Jake here. Thanks again for joining me on this conversation. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Lastly, don't forget to follow me on Twitter @JWurzak. I'll see you in the next episode.
Jake Wurzak is the founder and CEO of Dove Hill Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Jake and his guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Dove Hill Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not reflect or represent real estate, financial, or investment advice.